Back Home Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In the Free Zone with Norm. Guys, the summer is getting away from us already. It is, a week from tomorrow will be the 1st of July, so the month of June is already getting away from us. And Derek and I are going to talk a little bit about summer tonight, I think. Derek, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm witnessing an argument right now.
Are you?
My buddy paid $600 for Elton John tickets, and everybody's calling him crazy. And it spawned two debates here. One, is Elton John worth $600? And two, who do you think would be worth $600 in your opinion?
That is a good question because, in my opinion, I'm not real sure anybody is worth $600. I mean, I like some Elton John's music, but I can listen to him a hell of a lot cheaper than $600. I just don't. I mean, I like concerts and that kind of thing, but I don't know that I'm going to pay $600 to go see anyone, to be honest with you.
I mean, unless it's me in the room with the artist with like 3 friends, maybe. It's like an intimate, like, $600 a piece to go sit in like a studio apartment with Bruce Springsteen for an hour and a half. Okay, maybe. But going to a concert where there's 1,000 people, like, nope.
Yeah, no, I just, I like concerts, but I don't think I like one enough to pay $600 for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, now if he was going to come to my house and, I don't even know about that. But yeah, that's a lot of money for concert tickets. But
this guy doesn't have kids, so
and it's not just concerts. People pay outrageous sums of money to go to sporting events and all kinds of things like that. And
going to dinner.
Yeah,
what's the most expensive dinner you've ever paid for just like you and your wife?
Oh, for me and my wife. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Not very expensive. Probably $50 or $60. I mean, I might be wrong. It might be more than that, but it never anything real expensive. No, I mean,
we went to one fancy restaurant. I think we paid like $160 altogether for us both to eat. And like, it was just too fancy for me. Like, it wasn't that special.
Yeah, my wife would not enjoy that type of a place that we had to, pay that kind of money for, and I probably wouldn't either. Most barbecue joints are pretty cheap, and that's generally what we tend to eat at.
It turns out I have a very unsophisticated palate. Like I got spaghetti, and I was like, I love spaghetti, and I get it, and like it's not really spaghetti sauce; it's like noodles and wine, and I'm just like, what is this? Mm-hmm. Give me like some go to Walmart. They sell Prego. Just pour some of that in there; it'll be fine.
Yeah. Check this out. Tracy thinks we're cheapskates. He's probably right, by the way.
Click on that comment.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
There we go.
Tracy,
yeah.
What's the most you've ever paid for you and me? Even if it's just you or you and a date, what's the most you've ever paid for a meal? Because I mean,
I've paid probably. I can remember once paying $300 and something, but that was a lot of people. It wasn't just my wife and I.
My nice. Has a green shirt on, so he's
I was gonna say we got a floating head.
Okay, you gotta go, bro. Go have fun. They're going to like some balloon place or something. Hey, go, buddy. You gotta go. They're going to like some balloon place, or ball place. He says couple hundred for him in a day.
Couple hundred, yeah. Wow.
You could take me out anytime, Tracy.
Of course, Tracy got that big money. That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of big money, so I wanted to talk to Norm tonight about teachers and sort of what happens in the summertime months, because I used to work for the unemployment, and I talked to several teachers that actually didn't even get paid during the summer. Now, what's the skinny on that? Are there some teachers that do stay like paid in the summer, or what is the skinny on that?
Well, all right. And there may be some variation from state to state. Okay. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, most of your teachers are on what they call a 9-month contract. Okay.
Okay.
Now, that means that you basically, how do I put this? Probably the best way to put it is this. You actually get paid for 185 days of work. Okay. They spread that out over 12 months. So saying a 9-month contract is a little bit deceptive. The 9-month contract means that you report to work for 9 months, but you get paid your 9 months of pay over 12 months. Okay. So most teachers do technically get paid in the summer. Now, ones that aren't getting paid in the summer in Kansas would be interim teachers, long-term substitutes, paras, not actual teachers, but para-educators. And then you've got a certain number of people that are on other contracts too. You've got you've got 10-month contracts, 11-month contracts, 12-month contracts. Now there you're getting into your administrators and people like that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they get paid differently too. Teachers get paid on a scale. There's a pay scale. Okay. If you have this many years of experience and Okay. So you've got columns that go across, and those are based on education. Bachelor's plus 8, bachelor's plus 16, bachelor's plus 30, whatever. Okay. Master's plus 8, master's. Okay. And then you've got steps down for experience, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and on. Okay. The problem is that most of your columns bottom out after a certain number of years and you're maxed out. So if you in Kansas, in most schools, if you've got a bachelor's degree and you've got 30 years of experience, you're only getting paid for probably 7 or 8 years of experience. Okay. Now that's kind of getting into stuff that doesn't have anything to do with summer, but it gives you an idea.
I would like to know these things.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of an idea of how teachers are paid. Okay, so you're going to get paid according to your years of experience and your education. But the columns only go down as you get further across, as you get more education. So teachers can get bottomed out real quickly. Now, the next thing is you're technically on, I said a 9-month contract, but what you're technically on is a 185-day contract, okay? You're contracted to teach for 185 days, and they're going to take your pay from those 185 days and give it out to you over 12 months, okay? And obviously what you get paid total salary affects what your pay is for one day. But I mean, I think, and I don't even know this for sure, but I think that my per day salary is something like $300 or, I mean, that's not exact, but in that ballpark, about the only time you really know or think about what you get paid per day is if something happens and you get docked a day.
Right. You're missing some money.
Right. Which sometimes happens, and they deduct that out of your check. Then you realize what it is you get paid per day of teaching, So that's one of those things, So the thing is, we get paid for 185 days, but that gets spread out over 12 months. Okay. And, so that always brings up that argument. Oh, but teachers get paid in the summer, for doing nothing. Well, no, you're really getting paid for those 185 days. Mm-hmm. You're just getting it spread out over 12 months. In some ways, teachers might be better off if they just took that pay over those 185 days, let
me ask you this. How do other countries do it compared to what we do? Or is it pretty much the same, or?
I don't know for sure. I really don't with other countries. I know other states also do it differently. I mean, some states I think do pay out basically over the time that you're teaching, and then teachers, or maybe even you can choose to get paid that way. And here in Kansas, you can choose to take a lump sum. Rather than getting a paycheck each month over the summer, you can take those 3 months in a lump sum, right? And actually, it's not even always 3 months in every school district. Different school districts start your pay year at different times. For instance, at Liberal, you get your first check in August, okay? And so you get your last check in July when you leave. At most schools, you get your first check in September and get your last check in August.
Mm-hmm.
But liberal, they and there are probably other districts besides liberal, by the way, but liberal basically found that they were having a tough time. Their new teachers, because so many of them come from so far away, their new teachers were struggling to get started in liberal at the first of the school year. And so they wanted to pay them a month earlier, which was a good decision for them, for that particular district. And shows at least that somebody was thinking a little bit about their teachers, their young teachers.
So let me ask you this, and this, obviously this is just going to be your opinion. You don't know like 100% sure, but say somebody it's their first year teaching. They have you have to have a bachelor's pretty much to be a teacher, right?
Yes.
Okay, so they have a bachelor's degree. It's their first year teaching,
right? And then
they're getting paid for the 185 over a 12-month period, and they're in a 1-bedroom apartment in Liberal, Kansas. Can they make it?
Yeah, but they're not going to have a lot of. There's not going to be a lot of extras.
Crackers and ketchup.
What I'm saying? Well, I'm not sure about that, but I don't. I think they can probably afford a little more than ramen noodles every night, But all right, here's the thing. Okay, liberal pays well compared to a lot of other districts in the state. Okay, but if you've checked it out, you realize that it's a lot more expensive to live in liberal than it is to live in, say, Hugoton or Elkhart or Turpin or, okay. Rent in liberal is a lot higher and housing prices are a lot higher and everything like that. So liberal pays pretty well to begin, but I don't know that a teacher, a first year teacher, is any better off in liberal, even though they pay much better than a first year teacher would be, say, in Elkhart or Johnson, where they'd be getting paid less, but they can probably find housing a whole lot cheaper too, But now in some of these little towns, the problem isn't the price of housing, it's just the availability of housing, That's the problem you run into in some of the little towns, But and I know you'd think supply and demand, that lack of supply is going to drive up the price, and it is kind of true, but it's not always necessarily true. So yeah, most first year teachers can make it, but now here's where the problem comes in. You're talking about a single person here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's say that first year teacher has a wife and kids, or a husband and kids, whichever the case may be, right? Maybe it's, let's say the first year teacher, they have a spouse and they have 1 or 2 kids. Now that's a lot of added expense, right? And I'll guarantee you they probably cannot make it on that first year teacher's salary. Their spouse is probably going to have a job. Okay. And so that's where things really start to figure in is, when can a bachelor make it on a first year teacher salary? Yeah, no problem. Can a family of 4 make it on a first year teacher salary? I don't know.
Right.
Chances are their spouse is going to need to have a job for them to live, to live comfortably, And
why do you feel like it is a job where that comes with the territory? Why do you think it is that, historically, well, I guess it's not true though. Like you said, if you go and continue your education as a teacher, you can eventually get to where you're making good money.
Yeah, if you stick with it long enough and you have enough education, you can make decent money.
But then how much debt do you have?
But here's the thing. It's not that teachers don't make good money compared to the general populace. A lot of times they do. It's that teachers don't make good money compared to other professionals with the same level of schooling. Okay. A lot of teachers have the same level of schooling as a doctor or a lawyer, but they don't make anywhere near the same amount of money, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, and a lot of that is because, one thing teachers need to understand is you've chosen to work in the public sector, not the private sector. Okay. Schools don't turn profits. Okay. They're not, the schools themselves are not making money. they're paying money out. And so it's not like working for a business where that business can turn a profit and can then reinvest that profit in their workers if they so choose. Schools, you're working for the public, you're working for the government, money's always going to be tight because politicians, when they need money for one thing, are always going to look at the fact that schools are a huge part of their budget and want to cut money from the school budget. I mean, it's just the nature of politics, and it's the nature of working a public sector job. So, that's one of those things, but okay. So we were going to talk about summer a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So you're right. A lot of teachers do have summer jobs. It's just another way of, and teachers that do have summer jobs, a lot of times summers are a good time for them, right? That's a time when you pay some bills, when you, maybe you make more than the minimum payment on your credit cards. You maybe buy some things that you need for the upcoming school year. You buy school school clothes for the kids and that kind of thing. And so, a lot of teachers do work a summer job. A lot of teachers work a second job, especially teachers in some of your bigger towns and bigger cities where real estate values and, housing prices are as high as they are. A lot of teachers work second jobs, and if you don't coach, if you're just a teacher, you've got a little bit of spare time there.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things that a teacher does at home, grading papers and all that kind of paperwork type of stuff. But you can arrange it so that you've got some free time as a teacher, especially if you're not a coach. I mean, you're going to be away from the school by 3:30 or 4 every day. Right. You've got your evenings to maybe work a second job if you want to. You've got weekends, you've got holidays. All of those you're going to be off, and therefore, for a teacher, it is easier than for some people to work a second job. And so you do see a lot of teachers that work second jobs. Most teachers have some way, if only one of them is employed. Now, if you've got a married couple and both of them are teachers, obviously they've got double the income, and that's a little different. But most teachers where only one person in the family teaches or only one person in the family works, they've got some secondary source of income. I've often had secondary sources of income over the years. It's just one of those things. It certainly helps. I was a let's see, what is it? A Type 3 federal firearms license dealer at one time. Curios and relics, basically.
How do you get into something like that?
I don't know, just by being around guns and that culture, and you understand how it works. All right. So you
don't strike me as a gun guy. I mean, I know you're into them, but like in high school, I never would have pegged you. I'd peg you for somebody to be like, guys, we should really get rid of all the guns. That's what I kind of pegged you as.
Yeah. Well, okay. I can live with that.
You were peaceful, man.
In the 90s, especially, there was a booming, and really, into the mid 2000s, there was a pretty booming trade in military surplus. Okay. A lot of the Eastern Bloc countries, as their economies became more democratic and opened up, a lot of those governments started to break open their arsenals from World War II and sell those guns off in crates. You could buy a crate first in the late 80s and in the 90s. It was the Germans were selling off crate after crate of Kar 98s and Mausers and that type of weapon, and not just the Germans, but other countries that had been affiliated with the Germans. There were Italian K98 knockoffs and that kind of thing. And you could buy those. A lot of times you could buy a crate with 20 rifles in it relatively cheaply, sometimes as cheaply as anywhere from $35 to $50 per rifle. Now, there was a whole lot of cleanup involved, a whole lot of labor, because those things were generally packed in cosmoline, and that's not the easiest thing to clean off. So kind of imagine, for those of you that don't know what cosmoline is, kind of imagine an oily liquid wax that they just pour into the crates, and it soaks into the guns and runs down the barrels and into the actions, and then it kind of hardens, right? And so they would store those things in that stuff to preserve them. So the good news is they were well preserved. The bad news is it was a mess to clean them up, right? But you could buy crates of rifles, and yeah, Joe. Got to show you what Joe Davis says. Yes, it does suck, Joe. It really does. Yeah, so you could buy crates of rifles there for a while, and now that market has dried up. There's not much of it out there anymore. So like I said, in the late 80s and the 90s, it was German rifles. By the late 90s and into the mid 2000s, like 2010 or so, it was Russian guns and Eastern Bloc guns, and there it was Mosin Nagants and SKSs and guns like that were coming onto the market, right? And you could buy crates of those guns, and you could clean them up, and a lot of them you would just resell as is, but some of the nicer ones you would you'd maybe put new stocks on them and maybe outfit them with optics and do things like that and resell them that way. Sporterize them is what we would call it. You'd turn them into sport rifles, basically. Turn them into suitable hunting rifles, So you'd fix those things up, put a different stock on them, maybe put a Monte Carlo stock on it, maybe hand checker the stock, do a nice finish on it. Like I said, drill it for scope mounts, mount some nice optics on there, and resell it that way. Okay, and so that was. Are
you selling these online, or is this old
Well, okay. Early on, back in the 80s and 90s, these things were being sold at gun shops and gun shows. As we got on into and the internet became much more of a thing, then they were being resold, a lot of them online. Yeah, absolutely. And again, still at gun shows and that type of thing too. So, but but here was the thing. I mean, technically, if you had a Curios and Relics license, you weren't really a dealer. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You could buy and sell collector's weapons, but you could only sell a certain number. And it was not like being a true federal firearms dealer. So it was not something that you made a lot of money at, but you could make a little bit of money at it. There were limits on what you could do, A lot of that market dried up when President Obama was in office because of a couple of executive actions that he signed, that basically disallowed the import of certain weapons and definitely banned the reimportation of American weapons, which was kind of an odd thing to me, because to me there wasn't a lot of reimportation of American weapons going on. Mostly what there was importation of European weapons, and Asian weapons too. A lot of those weapons were coming from China as well. But so it was, that was a different market. I made money playing online poker. I did, there were a lot of different things that I did, and
did you lose any money playing online poker?
Well, hey, if you play poker, you're going to lose money and you're going to make money. I mean, if you know what you're doing, you should make money. A good player who knows a system and sticks to a system can make money. But and I'll be honest with you, I don't know how I have not done that in so long. I don't even know how the poker rooms are set up. They made that illegal in there. And, they froze your assets. And, it would have been before it became illegal. I'm trying to think of when this would have been. It would have been in the early 2000s, I think, and then they made it illegal and they froze everybody's assets and everything like that. And now they've opened it up again to, and American players can play for money again. And I have not, done it since then. So I don't know.
Why'd you stop?
Well, because you couldn't do it. If you were,
you just quit when it was illegal and you just never got back into it.
Yeah. If you were in the US, you couldn't play in cash games there for a long time. And I just never got back into it. I mean, it was something I did on the side, again, it made a little bit of money, but it was not a big deal. The main thing though was, you try to mitigate your circumstances. So you start off small and you make a little bit of a stake, and then you don't have to worry about whether you're losing money or not after that. You can play off of your winnings,
Right. Yeah.
But because to me,
did you have the same kind of luck in a real life setting though?
I'm not as good a poker player, or wasn't. I don't know anymore because it's been so long since I played. I was never as good a poker player in a live setting with people face to face as I was online, because it's a different game. Okay.
You don't have to have a poker face.
Yeah. When you're playing with people face to face, it's all about reading the person, not reading the cards and calculating probabilities. Okay. When you're playing online, you're not reading the person. You're basically just calculating odds and probabilities,
I've seen Rain Man.
Yeah, exactly. It helps if you have a Rain Man type mind. That's exactly right. And it also helps if you just kind of have a system, because chances are you'll be playing in 5 or 6 or 10 games simultaneously anyway. You're in multiple rooms simultaneously, and so, yeah, you've got to have a system. You got to.
What does the wife think when you're in there gambling like that? Like, is there any like? My wife counts the cups of coffee I drink, the number of cigarettes, everything. She counts everything I do. I mean, and if I was gambling, even if I was winning money, she'd be like, "Are you going to go gamble?" Like, what was her like thought on it?
I'm sure my wife would not. I'm sure my wife did not like it.
Does she know? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure she didn't like it. But like I said, it's not. We were not talking about big sums of money here,
Right.
Just as I used to tell her, I'd make her a little Pepsi money.
See, I'm the worst gambler, and I actually hate gambling. Like, I would rather, because I don't gamble much. The most I'll throw into the machines is $40, and I'll go to penny slots. Yeah. And I'll win like $60, and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, man, I'm doing it. You're flying, man!" And then like within 5 minutes, it's all gone, and I'm mad. I'm just being short with everybody. I'm mad. So like, what I would rather do when people suggest going to a casino, I would rather just pull up, take $40 out of my pocket, throw it off into the parking lot, and just drive away, because it'll save me. I will lose less hours of my life from stress by just throwing $40 at, because like I just have the worst luck with gambling, and I know it's designed this way. Like, as soon as I win, I know they're gonna take it all from me, but I'm just boom, 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 hitting the button like an idiot. And one thing that I kind of realized early on, and I think a lot of people did, is once they started doing the thing where you have a card, it's like, "Oh, you have a card now." I was like, "Of course I do. Every time I win, every time I lose, and I was just like, this is," and I knew it was all fixed, but yeah. So let me ask you this, like, how is it that some people have amazing luck with penny slots?
Hell, I don't know.
Oh, you're not sure? You're just a poker guy.
Yeah, I don't. I never did any real gambling. I mean, I'm not a fan of real gambling, to be honest with you.
Just poker.
Yeah, well, poker, like I said, poker. If you're playing a system and all of that, I mean, I suppose it is still gambling, but it is, and it's the reason why the courts have opened it back up is because they were able to show pretty conclusively that it's a game of skill. Now, don't get me wrong, luck is still a factor in it, but it is a game of skill. I mean, there is definitely a skill set to being a poker player, and like I said, playing in person and playing online are two completely different skill sets too. They really are. Your good poker players, like your good tournament poker players, those guys are just guys that are really good at reading people, and now don't get me wrong, they also have a great knowledge of probabilities and cards and odds and all of that, but they're also really good at reading people. Your online poker kind of removes that.
So to me, it seems like everybody that does well in poker is essentially counting cards. Well, but then they say you're not allowed to count cards.
Well,
but
all right.
You have like the MIT team that like took over the world. Like, where's the
all right?
Where's
but
the
now
line that we're
here's
crossing?
The problem: you're confusing poker and blackjack, which are two completely different games.
Two different games. Okay.
Blackjack is where people are counting cards, and the reason why they're counting cards is because the dealer is dealing from a stack of cards that has multiple decks of cards stacked into it. Okay. And so there is an element of counting cards. How many aces have come up? How many kings have come up? How many? Okay. That's blackjack.
Okay.
Poker, you're calculating odds. I mean, you're only using one deck. You've only got 52 cards, and you're going to re-deal after every hand. You're going to reshuffle the same deck and re-deal that same deck every hand. So counting cards doesn't really become a factor in poker.
Okay.
That's in blackjack that card counting is a factor, and it's because of the fact that they're using multiple decks of cards before they reshuffle, and yeah. So it's a different game, completely different game.
Okay. I thought so. I thought I was wrong as it was coming out of my mouth.
All right, so back to teachers and summers, man.
There we go.
A lot of teachers do work in the summers, some because they want to, some because they need to. I mean, literally have to make ends meet. But then there's also a lot of other stuff that goes on in the summer if you're a teacher too. Okay. And this is something that a lot of people don't think about. First of all, from when I started teaching, those contracts originally were like 170 some days, and then they went to 180 days, and then 185, and so your summer kind of kept gradually shrinking, and then a lot of school districts kind of dialed that back, and the number of contract days went back down in some school districts. And so I don't know where it is everywhere anymore. Over at Liberal, I think it's 185, but I think some other schools, I think at one time Elkhart had less contract days than that. I'm sure some other schools do too. And then you've even got, some schools in Kansas have even gone to a 4-day week. So that again changes your number of contract days and everything like that, but it also changes the length of your day. But so you basically got June and July, okay? Because by the 1st of August, if you're not actually in school, you're preparing for school, right? Mm-hmm. And during those 2 months, there are also anymore a lot of times trainings. You have a lot of summer trainings, whether it's programs like Capturing Kids' Hearts or Literacy First or whatever. There are all kinds of programs that schools try to adopt, and that's part of their what am I looking for? Accreditation process. Part of their accreditation process is they have to come up with a plan for improvement. Even if you're already the best school in the state, you've still got to have a plan for improvement as part of your accreditation process. And it has to be research based. So in other words, you have to buy something from a company. By the way, that's where the real money is made in education. It's not teachers. It's all those educational consultants and the companies and all the educational consultancy groups and things like that. Those are the people that are really getting rich off of education. Okay. Not teachers. So then you've got trainings, whatever program it is that your school buys, you're going to have trainings of that. And a lot of times those trainings occur in the summer, and sometimes different schools approach it differently. Sometimes you can use, like if you have to go to a training one day in the summer, you can use that as a flex day later. And maybe there's a day in August that I don't have to come in for a teacher work day or something like that. Or maybe you get paid a contract day, whatever your contract day is. Maybe you get paid that for that day, so whatever. Different school districts handle it differently. Some of them pay you for it. Some of it use it as flex time. But a lot of times there are trainings in the summer. And every teacher has to continue to take classes. You have to continue your education and continue your schooling. And so a lot of teachers do that in the summers too. A lot of teachers will either be taking online courses, which I think has become much more common in the last 10 or 15 years. But there are still a lot of teachers that, they leave in the summer and they head somewhere to go to summer school. Mm-hmm. They're at Fort Hays State going to summer school, or KU or K-State or Emporia State or wherever. They head off somewhere to go to summer school. And so that's something else that schools do in the summer. And then the last thing, of course, that is coaching. football season literally begins anymore the day that school's out. Okay. I mean, it's just literally if you get out on maybe not literally the day school gets out. Let's say you get out on a Friday, football season starts Monday, And so your football coaches, they're around all summer. So are most of your other coaches from your other sports as well, by the way. It's not just football, but it's especially with football. You've got summer weights programs, you've got camps, you can actually have practice within certain limits in the summers in pretty much any sport anymore. It used to be, your summer baseball programs, your Babe Ruth League, your American Legion ball, things like that. You had those baseball teams in the summers, and now all that kind of stuff, or not all of it necessarily, but a lot of it is coached by the actual kids, the actual coaches that coach them in high school, and of course, when I was a kid, that was the only baseball you played was in the summer, but now they play in school and they play in the summer. Same thing with soccer, but for a long time, those programs, baseball and soccer and tennis and, all those programs, they could coach their own kids in the summers, but basically basketball, football, and volleyball could not. Now, even basketball, football, and volleyball, now there are certain limits on it, but they can coach their own kids in the summers quite a bit too. And so now, especially your 4, 5, and 6A programs, but a lot of your programs, even in the smaller schools statewide, they've got 7-on-7 leagues that they play in the summers. They've got probably a team full contact camp that they'll go to, where they'll actually pad up and play scrimmages against other schools. And they, might play. I can remember going to one camp and it was like 3 days and we'd play like 3 scrimmages a day, so you almost get a 9-game season in a 3-day period, Now, granted, it's not quite the same intensity and quality as a real game, but so you've got camps like that. And then you've also got your own team camps. So coaching in the summer is pretty much a full-time job. Used to be that those coaches, you could go work in the summer because there wasn't a whole lot going on athletically in the summer. But that has changed so much, especially in the last 20 years. And coaching is pretty much a year-round job anymore. And that's part of the reason why, those summer weights programs and stuff like that are almost universally paid positions. So a lot of coaches, that's their summer job, is they're in the weight room, Mm-hmm. For most schools, it's a supplemental, just like any kind of coaching, right? Like if you're an assistant football coach, you get 10% of the base. If you do summer weights, you get, whatever percentage of the base. It's a supplemental. Okay. In some other schools, it's more like a stipend. It's a flat fee that they pay you, or, every school does it a little differently, but most schools anymore, it's on your supplemental salary schedule. It's a percentage and it's a supplement on your supplemental salary schedule. So you have your normal salary schedule, right? And then you have a supplemental salary schedule. Well, the supplemental salary schedule basically is what you get paid for coaching, for sponsorships, right? Like the band director gets a supplemental, the choir director gets a supplemental, the debate and forensics is a supplemental, a lot of schools' class sponsor is a supplemental, and the junior class sponsor gets more than anybody, the other class sponsors because they have to do prom, and whatever, right? And so pretty much everything you do outside of the duty day, it falls somewhere on that supplemental schedule, right? Whether it's coaching or sponsorships or whatever it is. So most schools have 2 salary schedules. They have their normal salary schedule, and then they have their supplemental salary schedule. And when you sign a contract, you will sign 2 contracts in Kansas. You'll sign your teaching contract, and then you'll sign a supplemental contract. Now, the thing about that supplemental contract is the school can non-renew you as far as your supplemental duties, or change your supplemental duties, or whatever at any time for no reason, or I mean that's totally up to them. You have there is no, even though tenure doesn't really even exist. By the way, tenure never really existed in Kansas, but it definitely doesn't anymore. There used to be certain protections in your regular teaching contract where if you got rehired for that fourth year, then the only way they could get rid of you after that was with cause, right? Up until then, they could get rid of you. As a matter of fact, you never even got a reason. They just non-renewed you, right? You didn't really get fired. You just got non-renewed. You weren't offered a contract for the next year. Well, supplementals are that way all the time, right? I mean, at any time they can just decide they're not going to hire you back for next year. So you hear about coaches getting fired. Well, that's not really true. Very few coaches get fired. As a matter of fact, almost none. What happens is they just don't get rehired for the next year. You can look at that as getting fired if you want to. It basically is the same thing, but that's what happens. You just don't get your contract renewed for the next year. And that's just about anybody that has been a coach for, any length of time has had a real coaching career, has probably been non-renewed or fired at some time.
Is it common for teams to have coaches like David Aranda where they're not a teacher?
It's becoming more common, especially in smaller schools, because as smaller schools, two things have happened. Number one, smaller schools have added more sports than they had at one time. So that creates more coaching positions. But just because you've created more coaching positions doesn't mean you've created more teaching positions. And so you may have a coaching position open and not have any teaching positions open. And that's one of the things that creates Rule 10 coaches like David. Okay. There are other things that create them too that, just it's part of the politics of coaching, Mm-hmm. So some towns are a little xenophobic with their coaching hires and things like that too, and so that sometimes something like that figures in. We want a hometown guy. Well, the hometown guy's a farmer, so he's a Rule 10 coach. So that there's that too. Sometimes, and I'm not knocking all Rule 10 coaches by any means. Sometimes the best guy for the job is not necessarily a teacher. Okay. I'm not trying to say that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's one of those things that happens as well, Mm-hmm. So yeah, that has become more common, especially at the small school level, mostly because of the advent of sports that they didn't used to play, right? Like if Elkhart's been playing baseball since the early 90s, right? So if you go back 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, sorry, you go back 30 years ago to 91, Elkhart didn't have baseball, didn't have softball, they didn't have wrestling, which I don't think they do now, but they have had at one time or another in there. I'm trying to think of what else Elkhart may not have had that they do have now. There might be others that I'm not thinking of, right? But so there are 3 new coaching positions that were created. Now, I'll bet you Elkhart probably has less teachers now than they did 30 years ago. They probably employ less teachers as a district. Okay. So teaching jobs, number of teachers in a lot of schools have gone down while the number of coaching jobs have gone up. And so especially in a lot of small schools, you see Rule 10 coaches. To me, where you really shouldn't probably see Rule 10 coaches, but still sometimes do, is in your bigger schools, your 4, 5, and 6A schools, And yet still occasionally you'll see a Rule 10 coach at a 4, 5, or 6A school. We had Cliff Abbott at Liberal, who was a Rule 10 coach. He owns a construction company. And the problem there is, and I'm not talking about Cliff particularly, but I'm talking about just in general. The problem there with something like that is, you've got your job that you need to devote your full attention to, right? Outside of school. Mm-hmm. And coaching demands a lot of time, and so a Rule 10 coach has to kind of have the right job to be able to be a Rule 10 coach, or you're probably not giving your day-to-day job the time and attention it deserves, Mm-hmm. So I think there's got to be a balance there too. You've got to have a job where it's possible for you to do that kind of stuff. Like David, when we interviewed him, he seemed to have that all pretty well in hand and all worked out, but for some Rule 10 coaches, that's the real difficulty, is balancing their job, which they've got to have for their livelihood, with coaching, which is something you don't do for money, you do for the love of it. If you're trying to coach for money, you're not very bright, because got paid more as an assistant coach at Liberal than I ever did as a head coach at any other school. Okay. But you still can't live on $4,500 a year. You know what I'm saying? Which is what you're going to get paid. What I got paid as an assistant at Liberal, more or less. I mean, give or take. There were some other factors there, but
that's not bad though. I mean, you put in how many hours you work.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I have never sat down and figured what it actually paid per hour, because I'm sure it would have been really depressing. Yeah. Coaching, it used to be football coaching, especially. You put in so many more hours and so many more days than other coaches. Now, because they've loosened things up in the summer, that's not quite as true as it used to be. Okay. But we did the one show where we talked about what football coaches do on the weekend, and it's pretty much all weekend. You're coaching 7 days a week. Okay. Now, I may be talking out of ignorance, and I may have basketball coaches here that want to correct me, but I don't know too many basketball coaches off the top of my head that come in on, and spend all day Saturday studying film and doing things like that, all day Sunday, doing scouting reports and preparing. And that's not to say that basketball coaches don't work hard. They absolutely do. It's not to say that they don't work on the weekends. They do. I'm just saying that it's a different type of thing, And so it used to be the football coaches put in a lot more time and a lot more days and all that than other coaches. But that's not nearly as true anymore as it used to be, because now all your coaches are pretty much coaching year round. It used to be just your football coaches that were coaching year round. Now it's pretty much most of your coaches. So that's the other thing you do in the summer is you coach, and hopefully you're lucky enough to get paid for it, because if you're coaching, you're not going to have time to work a second job. When I was a kid and you weren't allowed to work with your kids in the summer, and even when I first started teaching and you weren't allowed to work with your kids in the summer, a lot of coaches were insurance adjusters in the summer, like crop insurance, right? They'd travel wherever the hailstorms had been and stuff like that. And they were crop insurance adjusters in the summers or things like that. And almost everybody had some kind of a summer job. My dad always farmed in the summers. He, drove a truck or drove a tractor or, ground hay or did whatever. He usually farmed in some way in the summers. And that was true for a lot of coaches, but almost everybody used to have a summer job. And then it just became where, you were going to be coaching all summer. And so hopefully schools realized that, and they were going to pay you for that a little bit, because you weren't going to be able to have a job in the summer. You weren't going to have time, and now almost all schools realize that. And they, like I said, that's usually on the supplemental salary schedule anymore. A lot of that summer work.
We only like 10 minutes left. I want to ask you this. I know right now you're just teaching over there in Oklahoma. What are some sports that if they offered it to you, I'm talking like a head coach position, that you wouldn't want to do?
I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of a never say never kind of guy. I mean, there are certain sports that I absolutely would not be qualified to coach, because I don't know anything about them, right? Volleyball, I couldn't tell you the first stinking thing about volleyball. I don't know I don't know a dang thing about that sport. So yeah, if anybody were to ask me to be a volleyball coach, my first question would be, are you drunk? or how desperate are you? I mean, don't get me wrong. I suppose I could educate myself if they absolutely had to have something, but yeah, there are certain sports that I wouldn't coach just because I don't feel like I could do them justice. I don't know enough about them,
Right.
But when it comes to being a head coach right now, the only way I would be a head coach in any sport is if the program, I felt like the program needed me.
Yeah.
And, and there was, I would have to feel like I could help the program and I could help the program better than anyone else. I would have to feel like I was the best man for the job, and that, that the program needed me and that I could step in and make a contribution. And I feel that way as an assistant coach too right now. I mean, I'm not going to be an assistant coach for the money. I'm going to be an assistant coach if I feel like I can help the program and I feel like the program needs me.
Well, let me ask you this. What are you going to do? Because I'm assuming you're probably not going to be coaching football this next coming year in case something crazy happens. In case somebody asks you.
Exactly. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure if I'll be.
Well, I mean, like, what do you look say? It's Friday night. You don't have anything to do. What are you going to do?
I'll be at a football game somewhere.
That's
I'm
what
sure.
I was thinking, man.
Yeah.
So, are you going to be kind of
as a matter of fact,
with it and kind of drive all over the place and see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if I'm not coaching football in the fall, I think that I would enjoy very much. Yeah, just go somewhere different every Friday night and check out a game. What's the best matchup in the area? Who are two teams I'd really like to see play? Maybe I want to go down and watch Hooker and Texoma play.
And it's really involved. There's like restaurants in all these places you can try. And I mean, it'd just be a fun place.
Well,
it'd be a really
let's say
cool
most of these places.
Most of these places.
some of these towns, the closest thing to a restaurant is a convenience store. But
there's nothing wrong with, was it Chester's Chicken?
Yeah, there you go. Little Champs Chicken, I think, is the one we have here in Elkhart. There's Chester's.
I've been eating gas station chicken salad sandwiches.
There you go.
They're delicious, man. Circle K. But my wife's like, who are you? I'm like, I don't know. I just can't stop eating these things. Like,
there you go. Yeah, I honestly, I do think that I would enjoy that. And if I'm not coaching football in the fall, that's what I'll do. I'll go somewhere different every Friday night and watch them play. I'd probably enjoy taking in a liberal game as a spectator rather than as a coach. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I would enjoy taking in a Gaiman game or two as a spectator rather than as a coach. I've been to a few Elkhart games as a spectator. And, I think I'd probably enjoy that, just traveling around and watching some good football in the spring. Yeah. And so, if I'm not coaching in the spring, that's probably exactly what I'll do. I think that would be something that I would enjoy doing.
Is that something you would go solo on? What is your wife? Does she even know, like, she care about football at all?
My wife is... Okay, so there's two types of coaches' wives, One type is the coach's wife that she's up there in the stands every Friday night and she knows everything that's going on and she's yelling and, yelling at the officials, yelling at the players. And I say that, I don't mean that in a bad way. When I say yelling at everybody, I mean in it, she's involved. Okay. And then there are coaches' wives like my wife, which to me is the perfect coach's wife because it's what I need. That she's not real involved in that stuff. She doesn't go to many of the games and stuff like that. And she was always for me like a buffer between me and my job. I could come home and she wasn't going to talk to me about the game. And that was a good thing. I mean that in a good way, not in a bad way. But no, my wife has not gone to a lot of football games with me, and I wouldn't want to drag her along. Not that she wouldn't go with me, but I wouldn't drag her along. If fall rolls around and I don't have I'm not coaching and I'm going to some games, I might see if some guys I used to coach with, maybe see if Craig Murray wants to go to a game or two with me. Some people like that aren't necessarily in the coaching game anymore.
I have can't remember, where's my camera? I have a dash cam that has like a state-of-the-art microphone on it. I'm sending it to you, and you should make a total new podcast where you just basically film you and Craig Murray, you can go to a game with Darren Ashworth.
Yeah.
We just like do a little thing where you ask him like 15, 20 questions while you're driving. That would be, I would watch so hard. Like but you could like do like, 5 questions before the game, 5 questions after the game, something like that. But just talk about, I don't know. I see a podcast there, man. You just like basically reviewing high schools and like their,
well, hey,
there's a lot of stuff that goes, you can check out their concession stands, their band, all that stuff. There's so many facets of going to a game on a Friday.
Yeah,
it's not
there's
just
a lot of experience to it. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on those
You're right.
nights.
There is. And there's, it's a different atmosphere at every town and every school. And, there are some great atmospheres out there for high school football. There really are, in coaching in the WAC the last, 12 years or so, 14 years overall that I've coached in the WAC. Man, in football, you've got a great atmosphere at pretty much every WAC school, in the High Plains League, for years and years I coached there, and there are some great fields and great schools and atmospheres in the High Plains League as well, and a lot of times those small schools do have great atmospheres, it's a whole different thing. As a matter of fact, we used to always say, and I still kind of believe this, that the smaller the school, the better the food. You were talking about the concession stands. Mm-hmm. Yeah, generally, as I've found that's a good rule of thumb, especially in basketball, maybe even more so than in football. But yeah, the smaller the school, generally, the better the food in the concession stands, and because there's a higher chance of it being homemade food.
Yeah,
yeah.
I always thought Elkhart was pretty good. Like, and it was about, I think our the football and basketball was much of the same, right? Like pretty much the same crew doing the same stuff. But I mean, I thought it was great. But that's like a humongous part of going to a high school game is like hitting that concession stand.
Sure.
It's a great experience. Like I went to the Hatchet game, Dodge City versus Garden City, and minus the panic attack going through like the 45-minute process of getting into the place with that group of people.
Now, was this? I assume this is with the old field at the old high school, right?
No, this was probably,
was it in Dodge City or Garden City?
It was in Garden City.
Yeah,
and it was probably 4 years ago. It was at the new school.
Oh, okay. So
I sat on the Dodge City side because it was just my buddy was from Dodge City, and I was from Garden City, so we went to that game. Garden City won. Yeah. I rubbed it in, But yeah, it was just a fun atmosphere,
it is.
Took my kid.
Yeah, the Hatchet Game's a great atmosphere, I think. Yeah, I've never been to one. I'd like to go. If I'm not coaching this fall, that's a game I would probably go try to take into.
Yeah, it's a really. I mean, you feel the tension in the air because it's like there's only 50 miles between those two towns, but and everybody gets along. Not in the 90s. You hear stories about like. People like you have a Letterman's jacket in another town, you get beat up. I don't think it's really like that anymore. I don't think kids do that anymore.
Kids are a little different now than they were then. But yeah,
now they're just like
a lot less of that went on than people actually talked about even then.
Right? Yeah,
but
but on that night, like there's some dirty looks going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I like that. It's a good sports
in
rivalry.
The 90s. Yeah, in the 90s that Dodge City, Garden City, and Liberal, that was a very intense three-way rivalry there in the 90s, It really was. And as Liberal as that program kind of went downhill, that some of that has gone away. Because Dodge and Garden, they've always had their ups and downs, and they've had really good programs at times, and and still do have pretty good programs. But yeah, that's that Hatchet game has stayed strong, and it's been strong for a lot of years.
Now, I do love Garden City's old field.
Yeah, I did too. I loved the atmosphere of their old football
field. It felt
field.
like a stadium almost. Like it was a bowl, So like you felt like it was like a real football field, and I don't think I ever caught any high school games there, but I did go to several. When I was playing band for Garden City, I went to several college games there, and it was a great time.
Well, it's just, and the high school building itself is so close to the field and kind of surrounds the field. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it does. It definitely gives it a different atmosphere. It holds that sound in there in a way that their new stadium doesn't.
I used to live 3 blocks from it, man. You knew it was Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just
Yeah, it was
people.
It was a great atmosphere for both high school football and for college football. I can remember going to some college games there, and yeah, it was a good atmosphere. But yeah, that's, like I said, all of those WAC schools have a great atmosphere. Hayes plays at Fort Hays State's field there, Lewis Field, Great Bend. They've really made some improvements in their facilities and stuff. And they, Great Bend, that program improved a lot in the 2000s. And it got to where it was a pretty good atmosphere to play in too, and so, yeah, all of those WAC schools that they've all had good programs at one time or another. They've all had, they've all got great fields and a great atmosphere to play in. Great fans at all of the WAC schools. That's what creates the atmosphere, is the fans. And so, yeah, I've always enjoyed coaching in the WAC and the atmospheres at all of those schools. And, and like I said, the High Plains League too. I coached in the High Plains League a lot of years too. Pretty much all but 1 year that I wasn't coaching in the WAC, I was coaching in the High Plains League, And so, yeah, those High Plains League schools, a lot of them have great fans and great atmospheres. And, the problem is with the small schools, sometimes if your team's not winning, those crowds can get pretty small, and that's where you kind of lose some of that atmosphere, is when a team's down and people know it. Sometimes those, what I'm saying is, at a small school, 15 or 20 people in the stands not being there can make a big difference in the crowd. It doesn't take very many people not being there before you notice it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And because they have less people in the stands to begin with.
Yeah, it's I love I even consider going to high school games here, because it's like basically a college game here. It's like you see some of these schools' rivalries and stuff, and they're humongous schools. I'm just like, I would never go there.
Yeah, I can understand that. Well, Derek, I'm not sure we really talked about what we meant to talk about, but we darn sure talked.
We talked. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was a good time. Guys, thanks a lot for being here and for listening. In the Free Zone with Norm is a production of Back Home Media. Check out Back Home Media and the services they offer. Check us out on all of our podcast platforms. We're there on all of them. Subscribe and download. We'll be back next week. Let me see. We'll be back next week. By the way, next week is the summer moratorium.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know what that means next week is the one summer dead week. It's your summer break, basically, if you're a coach next week. You're not allowed any contact with the kids next week. It's summer moratorium, and so nobody should be you're not even allowed in the weight room next week.
Oh, so. I remember that from high school. Yeah, there was just like 1 week it was like off limits.
Well, yeah, but what you were thinking of was the dead week during school.
Okay.
The summer moratorium is a relatively new thing. It's only been in the last couple of years, but yeah, so next week is summer moratorium, so nothing going on as far as high schools go next week in the state of Kansas, at least. I don't know if any of the surrounding states have a summer moratorium. I don't think they do, but Kansas does. So next week will be kind of a dead week for them. And we'll be back next week. And then we'll, next week, I think it's probably just going to be Derek and I talking about some things. And I think we may talk some football specific stuff next week. And then after next week, we're going to start trying to get some guests in here again. And so that's kind of where we're looking at for the future, guys. So thanks for being with us. Again, check out Back Home Media. Go to our podcast platforms, download and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, I don't think and I thought it, that's different. I said what I said and I meant it, or lamented. Words given weight without thought in a person, the way that I talk and the way that I ought to be able to pause and to say that the fault can be placed on my arms, to display for the assault, to disgrace in its arm. Pray for the day they could wait for the calm. You can't control the storm, only weather it, whether it's 5 weeks and 5 days of rain sideways, or scorched earth, search for death, or water left with all the thorns, with the petals gone, settle on the breath of autumn. If the ground fits, wear it, the